The survivor is a woman.
Alien 3 is not merely a movie. It is a cinematic calamity that epitomises the worst excesses of Hollywood's franchise culture. In a series renowned for its taut suspense and groundbreaking horror, the instalment stands out not as a worthy successor, but as an unforgivable blemish on an otherwise stellar saga. It is a film that not only fails to deliver on its promises, but also succeeds spectacularly in betraying its audience and its own legacy. From the outset, Alien 3 was doomed by a tumultuous production process that saw a revolving door of directors and writers, each bringing their own incomplete vision to the table. David Fincher, a brilliant director in his own right, was handed a chaotic script and a meddlesome studio, creating a perfect storm for disaster. The film's narrative is disjointed, a patchwork of half-baked ideas and abandoned subplots that leave the viewer more bewildered than enthralled. The atmosphere of the film, meant to evoke the claustrophobic terror of the original, instead suffocates under the weight of its own pretentiousness. But let's delve deeper into the cesspool of chaos that birthed Alien 3. The studio, 20th Century Fox, decided that the best way to create a cinematic masterpiece was to micromanage every detail and change creative directions as often as Hollywood reboots franchises, and J.J. Abrams or Dismal Plus ruins them. Enter Vincent Ward, the visionary who proposed an outlandishly surrealist original concept involving a wooden planet inhabited by monks. Naturally, this was too avant-garde for the studio execs, who promptly showed him the door. His vision was probably too daring and original for the suits, who preferred something more traditional, like a dull, lice-infested prison planet. Before Ward, the helm was almost given to Rennie Harlan, who quickly realised that trying to direct Alien 3 was akin to conducting brain surgery with a rusty spoon. Frustrated with the never-ending script rewrites and the studio's indecision, he jumped ship before the disaster could further tarnish his career. Producers and writers Walter Hill and David Giller, veterans of the franchise, also found themselves caught in the crossfire of creative chaos. Their ideas were mangled and reshuffled so many times by the studio that whatever original vision they had was buried under layers of corporate meddling. It's a wonder they didn't vanish faster than toilet paper in a pandemic. And let's not forget H.R. Geiger, the genius behind the original Xenomorph design, who was largely sidelined in this production. His imaginative and terrifying concepts were glossed over in favour of inconsistent and subpar CGI, reducing the once-feared alien to a laughable cartoon. Geiger's involvement was minimised, making way for visual effects that were about as frightening as a mildly annoyed emoji. David Fincher, despite his evident brilliance, was thrown into this maelstrom without a lifeline. The studio's relentless interference stifled his vision, leaving him to juggle a mishmash of half-baked ideas and abandoned subplots, which only contributed to the film's disjointed narrative. Fincher's experience was so grueling that he has largely disowned the film, avoiding discussions about it in interviews as if it were a dark and shameful secret. The trouble with Alien 3's production can largely be traced back to the studio's incessant interference and the resulting chaos in special effects, turning what could have been a masterpiece into an unwatchable mess. From the outset, 20th Century Fox meddling was relentless. Executives, driven by their desperate need to cash in on the franchise's success, imposed their will on the project with little regard for artistic integrity. This resulted in a revolving door of directors and writers, each trying and failing to make sense of a narrative that was being constantly rewritten and repurposed to fit the studio's ever-changing demands. The reliance on CGI over set-based practical effects, which had worked so well in the previous films, undermined any potential for genuine fear. The Xenomorph's life cycle, once a source of endless fascination and dread, became muddled and inconsistent, stripping away the mythos that made the creature so compelling. The alien, which should have been the film's centrepiece, was instead a glaring reminder of the production's failures. Adding insult to injury is the cast, which is a collection of squandered talents, their performances suffocated by the film's flawed execution and lacklustre direction. Sigourney Weaver returns as Ellen Ripley, but even her formidable presence cannot salvage the mess. Weaver's portrayal is one of the few redeeming qualities, but it is marred by a script that fails to give her character the depth and respect she deserves. Her interactions with the supporting cast are stilted and lack the emotional resonance that marked her previous outings. Charles S. Dutton, a seasoned actor with a commanding screen presence, is criminally underused as Dylan, the spiritual leader of the prison colony. His character, which could have been a compelling foil to Ripley's hardened survivor, is instead relegated to spouting cliched dialogue and performing heroic sacrifices that ring hollow.
We've got a good place to wait here. And until now, no temptation.
The potential for a rich character arc is buried under the film's chaotic storytelling.
Take off! I gotta re-educate some of the brothers.
Charles Dance, an actor of considerable gravitas, plays the prison doctor Clemens. Dance brings a quiet intensity to the role, but his character is abruptly killed off just as he becomes interesting.
None of them has seen a woman in years.
Neither have I, for that matter.
This narrative decision is emblematic of the film's broader failings. Any hint of depth or development is swiftly undermined by thoughtless plot twists and shock value. The rest of the cast, a motley crew of British character actors, is given little to work with. Paul McGann, Brian Glover and Ralph Brown deliver performances that range from forgettable to laughably bad, their characters indistinguishable in their shared misery and pointless existence. The ensemble's lack of development and distinctness renders their fates meaningless, a far cry from the memorable and diverse crew of the Nostromo or the Colonial Marines. So let's dive into the plot of this masterstroke. The movie kicks off by mercilessly killing off Newton Hicks in the opening credits. Yes, that's right, the beloved survivors from Aliens are dispatched off-screen in a fiery crash. Clearly, the filmmakers knew exactly how to win over the fans, by obliterating their emotional investment right from the start. Ripley crash lands on Farina 161, a dreary, lice-infested penal colony, inhabited by bold convicts who have apparently taken a vow of celibacy.
All right.
Because nothing screams exciting sequel like a sexless prison planet. But wait, there's more. Ripley, after shaving her head and being subjected to the colony's charms, discovers she has brought along an unwelcome guest, a xenomorph gestating inside a dog, or an ox. The filmmakers couldn't quite decide, so they helpfully included both versions in different cuts. The alien in the original is now a dog-alien hybrid. The dog-alien hybrid starts picking off the inmates one by one in what can only be described as the least suspenseful killing spree ever committed to film.
How do you know?
That's his boot.
Meanwhile, Ripley learns that she has an alien queen embryo inside her, making her the galaxy's unluckiest woman. Imagine the intergalactic irony here. Ripley, who has survived 2 encounters with these monsters, now finds herself nurturing the next queen. The only thing missing is a world's unluckiest astronaut mug to complete her collection of cosmic misfortunes. It's almost as if the scriptwriters were playing a cruel joke, thinking, how can we make Ripley's life even more miserable? Oh, I know, let's have her be a walking incubator for her worst nightmare. She decides the best course of action is to die heroically, thus ensuring the film's grim tone remains unrelentingly bleak. In an inspired move of corporate synergy, the Weyland-Yutani Corporation shows up to retrieve the queen embryo, promising Ripley salvation if she cooperates. Because we all know the best way to resolve a plot is to introduce a faceless evil corporation in the final act. Ripley, ever the altruist, sacrifices herself by swan diving into a furnace, clutching the chestburster in a scene that's supposed to be tragic but comes off as unintentionally comedic. I would usually do an exploration of themes in the next bit. Oh, go on then, here we go. Alien 3's themes are a jumble of nihilism and religious allegory, neither of which is explored with any depth or coherence. The film's attempt at a sombre tone is undone by its lack of narrative focus and character development. What could have been a meditation of faith and redemption in the face of unsurmountable horror instead comes across as pretentious dribble. The film's conclusion, meant to be a poignant end to Ripley's journey, is robbed of its impact by the preceding 2 hours of aimless storytelling. The film tries, oh how it tries, to drape itself in the cloak of profound themes, only to end up looking like a toddler playing dress-up in its parents' wardrobe. The nihilism, which should evoke a chilling sense of hopelessness, instead feels like a petulant teenager's diary entry. It's as if the writers thought slapping on a few bleak lines of brooding visuals would automatically elevate the movie to high art. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. Religious allegory is another grandiose theme Alien 3 unsuccessfully grapples with. The convicts on Fiorina 161 have formed a quasi-religious cult, giving the film ample opportunity to delve into the themes of sin and redemption and faith. Instead, we get half-baked sermons and hollow spiritual musings that are as enlightening as a warning contents hot message on a McDonald's coffee cup. The script seems to think it's channeling Dostoevsky, but it lands closer to a bad Sunday school play. Ripley's Christ-like sacrifice at the end is supposed to be the emotional climax, but it falls flat because the film hasn't earned it. After spending 2 hours trudging through a swamp of meaningless deaths and convoluted subplots, her sacrifice feels less like a heroic act and more like a desperate plea to end the audience's suffering. The film's attempt at portraying her as a martyr is undermined by the lack of any substantial build-up or meaningful character interactions that would make us care. The supposed depth of Ripley's inner turmoil is portrayed with all the subtlety of a caps-lock text. Her dreams and hallucinations about the Xenomorph Queen are meant to symbolise her internal struggle, but they are so ham-fisted and poorly executed that they evoke more eye rolls than empathy. It's as if the filmmakers confused heavy-handed symbolism with profound storytelling. But before the train wreck we know as Alien 3, there was a glimmer of hope in the form of a script penned by none other than cyberpunk luminary William Gibson. Yes, the man who gave us Neuromancer was tasked with breathing new life into the Alien franchise. And what did Hollywood do with this precious gift? They tossed it aside like yesterday's rubbish. Let's take a moment to revel in the brilliance that might have been. So here's what you could have won. Gibson's script, a veritable symphony of sci-fi intrigue, opens with the survivors of Aliens, Hicks, Newt and the ever-resilient Ripley, aboard the Sulaco. But surprise, a faction of space commies from the Union of Progressive Peoples intercepts the ship, setting the stage for a Cold War in space. Ripley spends most of her time in a coma, presumably to give Sigourney Weaver a well-deserved break from carrying the franchise on her shoulders like a female Atlas. Plus, she wanted to be killed off, and they figured maybe they could convince her to come back if she had a movie off. The story really gets going when Hicks and Bishop the android find themselves in the middle of a galactic arms race. Both the UPP and Weyland-Yutani want to weaponise the Xenomorphs, because obviously the best use for creatures that decimate entire colonies is to turn them into biological weapons. Gibson's script oozes with geopolitical tension as our heroes navigate through espionage, double crosses, and alien outbreaks on not one, but 2 space stations. The climax, a veritable ballet of chaos, sees Hicks battling waves of xenomorphs and corporate soldiers. There's a tantalising glimpse of an alien-human hybrid, hinting at even darker genetic tampering. The script ends on a cliffhanger, setting the stage for further interstellar escapades and deeper exploration of the xenomorph menace. So naturally, Hollywood thought, nah, we'll pass, because who needs a smart, politically charged sci-fi thriller when you can have a monotonous slog through a lice-infested prison planet? Then we have the assembly cut, often hailed by fans as the version that redeems Alien 3. This extended edition is a desperate attempt to piece together the remnants of a shattered production, as if stitching together more scenes of a broken film could somehow mend its inherent flaws. With an extra 30 minutes of footage, the assembly cut is marketed as a closer representation of David Fincher's original vision, though Fincher himself has distanced himself from it, likely to avoid association with this cinematic disaster. In this version, we get to see the alien gestate inside of an ox instead of a dog, because that totally changes the film's fundamental issues, right? The extra scenes include additional character development for the inmates, while more screen time for them to spout meaningless dialogue and perform forgettable actions. We also get a slightly altered climax where the alien is trapped in a lead mould and then doused in molten metal. This change adds a few more minutes of grim visuals, but does nothing to address the film's core problems. The assembly cut is often lauded for its improved pacing and additional backstory, but let's be real. Putting lipstick on a pig doesn't change the fact that it's still a pig. The extended scenes might offer a tad more coherence, but they can't compensate for the fundamental narrative and thematic failures that plague the film. It's like repainting the walls of a burning building, futile and ultimately pointless. Now, you might think Alien 3 is the worst of the franchise, but unfortunately Alien Covenant arrived 25 years later and said, hold my beer. Ridley Scott, returning, somehow managed to create a film even more pretentious and convoluted than Prometheus. It's like Scott saw the mixed reactions to Prometheus and thought, I can top it. David the android, played by Michael Fassbender, becomes the central focus, and to be fair to him, he's probably the best thing in it, but the rest is so bad that he'd need more than a power loader to be able to lift this disaster. In comparison, Alien 3's failures seem almost quaint, a misguided attempt at concluding Ripley's story rather than a complete misfire. Despite its numerous failings, Alien 3 is not entirely devoid of merit. For starters, the film's dark and oppressive atmosphere is commendably consistent, creating a visually distinct setting that stands apart from its predecessors. The production design, with its grimy industrial aesthetics and claustrophobic interiors, effectively conveys a sense of despair and isolation that fits the narrative's tone. The film's willingness to explore darker themes and its attempt to delve into the psychological turmoil of Ripley offers a brave, albeit flawed, departure from the previous action-orientated instalment. Sigourney Weaver's performance, as always, is a beacon of resilience amid the chaos. Her portrayal of Ripley, burdened by loss and driven by grim determination to end the Xenomorph threat, is pretty good. Weaver's commitment to the role, including her decision to shave her head for authenticity, demonstrates her dedication and elevates the material she was given. Moreover, the film's special effects, when they use the practical ones, for the Xenomorph, occasionally capture the visceral horror that define the series. When they're not hampered by subpar CGI, the creature's designs retain some of its original menace, sort of. Finally, the film's score by Elliot Goldenthal, while not as iconic as its predecessors, provides a backdrop that is as bleak as the narrative. In the end, Alien 3 is a testament to the perils of corporate meddling and artistic compromise, stands as a stark warning of what happens when a franchise is milked for profit without regard for its creative integrity. The film's myriad failings are not just disappointments, they are betrayals, the trust and admiration that the series had painstakingly built. Alien 3 does not simply fall short of its predecessors, it drags the entire franchise into the depths of mediocrity. In a just world, Alien 3 would be relegated to the annals of cinema as a cautionary tale, a monument to Hollywood's hubris and the destruction of a beloved series. For those who cherish the legacy of Alien and Aliens, this third instalment remains an unforgivable blight, a film best forgotten in the dark recesses of space where no one can hear it scream. As we reflect on the plane crash of Alien 3, it's essential to recognise the glimmers of potential that were so thoroughly squandered. William Gibson's visionary script, with its intricate plot and rich character dynamics, could have revitalised the franchise and taken it in bold new directions. Instead, the choice to discard his work in favour of a muddled, uninspired narrative speaks volumes about the studio's priorities. The assembly cut, while a valiant effort to salvage some dignity from the wreckage, is a bit like an OnlyFans creator suddenly finding God, a horse that has ultimately bolted, and all but ultimately underscores the film's intrinsic flaws. Even with additional footage, the fundamental issues of incoherence, poor character development, lackluster storytelling remain glaringly apparent. It's a reminder that no amount of editing can fix a fundamentally broken foundation. Alien 3 serves as a cautionary tale for filmmakers and studios alike, a stark illustration of what happens when creative vision is sacrificed on the altar of commercial expedience. It's a tragic end to what could have been a remarkable trilogy, leaving fans to wonder about the alternate paths untaken and the potential forever lost. For those who cherish the legacy of Alien and Aliens, this third instalment will always be remembered as the moment the franchise lost its way, a blight on the cinematic landscape that, like the Xenomorph itself, is best contained and forgotten. So remember, before going into hypersleep, always check for alien eggs, because nothing ruins a good nap like becoming the unwilling host of an alien queen. I've been the Eclectica. Smash that like button like you would a celebrity off your free pass list, and consider subscribing to my little space on the interwebs. Up next will be Resurrections. Yes, I'm putting myself through that one as well.